Welcome back everyone. Wes from Carl Wesley Sewing Patterns here. This video is going to be a little bit different than my previous ones because it isn't going to be a tutorial. It's just going to be me providing some information. I'm going to give you 5 of my best tips for sewing stretchy knit fabrics. Tip number 1 is to use a ballpoint or stretched needle in your sewing machine. When I first started sewing, I didn't really think much about the needle in my sewing machine, and I pretty much tried to use a universal needle on all types of fabrics, both woven and knit. Sometimes this will work fine, but a lot of the time using a universal needle on knit fabric will result in poor stitch quality or even skipped stitches. What you need to use instead is a ballpoint or stretch needle, which is shaped differently to work better with knit fabrics. If you have a Serger or a Coverstitch machine, you should switch over those needles as well. Most often, I use a 7511 stretch needle in my sewing machine and my Serger, and I find that it works really well on a variety of stretchy knit fabrics. Any supplies discussed in this video will be linked below using my Amazon affiliate links. I'm not a paid promoter of any of these products, but I do earn a small commission if you make a purchase using my link, so that is much appreciated. I only recommend products that I use and truly believe in. Tip number 2 for sewing stretch knit fabrics is to always test your stitching on scraps before stitching on your final garment. I've unfortunately learned the hard way to use this tip. When I first started sewing stretch knit fabrics, I'd often get overconfident and head right to the sewing machine without doing any test stitching. Sometimes this would work out alright, but most of the time I'd end up with stitching problems that I'd have to rip out and start over, which just wasted a whole bunch of time. You want to test stitch on scraps to make sure the stitching has a good appearance, stretches well, and has no skipped stitching. Anytime you change thread, tension, or any setting on your machine, make sure to stitch on scrap fabric first. Furthermore, there's a lot of variety among knit fabrics, which means different fabrics can behave differently even with the same settings on your machine. Moral of the story is anytime you make a change, run a test scrap before you sew on your project. It will save you a lot of time and frustration. Once you get some practice, you'll learn which settings on your sewing machine tend to work best. Tip number 3 for sewing stretch knit fabrics is to familiarize yourself with the different stretch stitches on your sewing machine. If you have a domestic sewing machine with a variety of built-in stitches, you will likely have several stitches that are useful for sewing knits. The 2 that I use most often are the lightning bolt stitch. This stitch is like a straight stitch for seaming knit fabrics because it kicks the needle out to the side before every stitch, which will allow the seam to stretch. And the other one I commonly use is a staggered zigzag stitch, which can be used for attaching elastic or hemming. Beyond that, a basic zigzag stitch also has a lot of use for stretchy fabric. Your machine may also have stitches that mimic serging or do other special things. My suggestion is to read over your sewing machine manual to learn which stitches you have that can be used for sewing knits. Tip number 4 is to consider purchasing a Serger or Coverstitch machine. You really don't need a Serger or Coverstitch machine to sew knits, but there's no substitute for these 2 specialized machines if you're serious about sewing knits and you want your sewing projects to have a commercial look. There are some really great and inexpensive models available, so don't think that you have to have a huge sewing machine budget to make professional looking knitwear. The Serger I'm using currently is an inexpensive brother model that I purchased for less than $300, and it's worked out really well for me, considering that I almost exclusively sew knits and I sew more than the average hobbyist. I'm not a paid spokesperson, but I've owned 2 brother machines, that I've done tons of sewing on, and I feel that the value for the money is great. They also have an inexpensive Coverstitch machine on Amazon, which is about $500 during the filming of this video, and it has a 4.6 out of 5 star rating with over 1,000 reviews. See the description below for the Amazon links if you're interested in either of these machines. Last but not least, tip number 5 for sewing stretchy knit fabrics is to cut your pattern pieces using a small rotary cutter and weights. If you've watched any of my tutorials, you know that I always advocate rotary cutting knits for 2 main reasons. First, stretchy fabric will easily stretch and shift around using scissors, which is avoided by having the fabric lay flat and relaxed during rotary cutting. Second, rotary cutting is way faster than scissor cutting, and using weights saves you time because you don't have to pin all the pattern pieces down. The reason I say to use a small rotary cutter is because it will be easiest to navigate curves like necklines and armholes. If you're interested in learning how to make your own easy crochet pattern weights from metal washers, check out my last video release. That's all for this video. I hope you found these 5 tips for sewing stretch knit fabrics useful. Let me know in the comments below which tip you found most useful, and if you have any other useful tips I didn't mention here, I hope you'll share those as well. A like and a subscribe is always appreciated, and thank you very much for checking out my channel. See you in the next video, and happy sewing!